Welcome to the Office of Special Counsel's video series on Prohibited Personnel Practices, or PPPs. Please be sure to visit our website at www.osc.gov to view the full series of videos. In this video, we will discuss the prohibition concerning the failure to adhere to the laws, rules, or regulations that directly concern the merit system principles. Title V of the United States Code, Section 2302, B12, prohibits an agency from taking improper personnel actions against employees. Generally speaking, when evaluating whether an agency took an illegal personnel action in violation of this section, OSC considers two main elements. The first element requires that a personnel action was taken or not taken. For purposes of this section, OSC's ability to prosecute is limited to personnel actions, as defined in our statutes. Not every employment action is a personnel action. For example, receiving an updated position description is not listed. Additionally, it is important to note that unlike other PPPs, there is no authority to act on threats of personnel actions under Section 2302b12. The second element requires that a law, agency rule, or federal regulation was violated, and this law, rule, or regulation must directly concern one of the merit system principles. Here is an example of a case that did not satisfy this element.
An employee filed with OSC because he had recently experienced a change in duties after the agency reorganized. Specifically, the employee wanted to retain all of his prior duties. However, the reorganization resulted in some duties being shifted outside of his work division. While there are some laws and regulations related to transferring duties, ultimately, the decision was within the agency's discretion.
In this case, no law, rule, or regulation was violated, so we did not analyze whether there was a direct connection to a merit system principle. The merit system principles are listed at Title V of the United States Code, Section 2301. This is a list of ideals that government employers should strive to uphold. To show a violation of Section 2302b12, the violated law, rule, or regulation must directly concern at least one of these principles.
We had a case where a safety officer was called back from Thanksgiving leave and told that he was being fired before his probationary period expired. He was told that a firing would be a stain on his record, but if he resigned, it would all go away. He was only given 3 hours to decide and ultimately resigned in lieu of being fired from the agency. He filed a complaint with OSC, and we determined that despite the employee being informed that he was being fired based on poor performance, there was never any record of issues with his performance. It turned out that his supervisor never wanted to hire a safety officer in the first place, and essentially sabotaged his development in an effort to get rid of him. First, the agency took a personnel action when it issued the letter of termination. Second, the termination violated agency rules and regulations with respect to probationary employees because the agency failed to abide by its own procedures for completion of mid-year reviews, how to regularly inform probationary employees of their performance, and how to address underperforming employees. And third, the agency's violation of its own rules and regulations directly concerned Merit System Principles 2, 4, 6, 7, and 8, which deal with equity, conduct, retention, training and development, and neutrality. A constructive adverse action allegation such as a discharge is very difficult to support because the presumption is that the employee-initiated action was voluntary. However, an employee can overcome that presumption of voluntariness by convincingly showing that the discharge was the product of deception, misinformation, or coercion by the agency. that the agency imposed the terms, the employee's circumstances permitted no alternative but to accept those terms, and those circumstances were the result of improper acts by the agency. In this case, the agency failed to follow its own procedures regarding probationary employees, and we were able to demonstrate that in this case.
For more information about the prohibited personnel practices that cover violations of the laws, rules, or regulations that directly concern or implement the merit system principles, please access the other resources on our website.